Good evening and welcome to Catholic Peekskill. I'm Fr.John Higgins, your host for this public access television show, and I'm so glad you could join us. Today our topic continues with confirmation. We've been going through the 7 sacraments to place them in the context of salvation, as well as our celebration of the faith at our beloved Catholic Peekskill. And this topic is a joyful one, because just recently in our own parish, over 80 kids and over 20 adults received this great sacrament of confirmation. And it's fitting that we should talk a little bit about it. I want to start with sharing something that happened in a rectory last week. It was a little frightening for Father Vincent when he was on the top floor and he just walked out of the chapel, and it was at nighttime and something hit him in the head. It was a bat. There was a bat that got into the rectory somehow, and it reminded me of a story about an ecumenical lunch that took place between a rabbi, a Protestant minister, and a Catholic priest. Every month they would get together and talk about their pastoral issues and share problems and solutions. And one particular time, the minister said he had a problem because there were bats in his bell tower. "What did you do?" they asked. "Well," he said, I went up there with a broom and I tried to swish them out, but they were gone for a day, but another day later they were back again." "How about you? Did you ever have the problem?" "Yes," the rabbi said. "I went up there and I brought an exterminator. And he went in there and did his special spray and other things to keep the bats away. And unfortunately, they came back just a month or two later. And they both looked at the Catholic priest. "Did you ever have a problem with bats?" they asked him. And he said, "Yes, but I found the perfect solution." "What did you do?" they asked him. "Well, I had a number of bats in the bell tower. What I did was I brought in a bishop. He administered the sacrament of confirmation to the bats, and we've never seen them again since." A little Catholic humor. Do you know, one bishop of the United States recently named the sacrament of confirmation, he called it the sacrament of goodbye, because sadly so many people, after they receive the sacrament, they disappear, sometimes for good, sometimes until they get married, and sometimes for an extended period of time until they come back to the practice of their faith. Last year, Bishop Byrne, who is the regional Episcopal vicar for our area, confirmed over 50 young people in Catholic Peekskill. And he told a wonderful story. He made a great comparison for them. He asked the kids what was their best sport, and many of them said soccer. So what would it be like if you got ready to join the team? And in getting ready to join the team, you got your uniform. You went to all the practices. You learned how to do the ball handling. You got up your skills to get ready to practice and to play the sport of soccer. And on the very day in which you were going to have your first game, you quit the team. What good would that be, he asked the kids. I think they got the message that confirmation is just a beginning for a Catholic Christian. He becomes an adult once he or she receives the sacrament of confirmation, and then he's launched. And it's fitting that as a Catholic Christian, now completely initiated, now through confirmation, should receive a new power and employ that power for the good of the Church. What is that power is a reasonable question. Why do we call it confirmation? To that I'm going to go back to the trusty blackboard and just go back to our usual circular figures to speak about the sacrament of confirmation. We had spoken previously about how the soul can be maybe depicted by a circle. Perhaps you could use a cloud. We have bodies and we have souls. Our soul is spiritual. It's immaterial. You can't really draw it. Our body takes up dimension in space. But let this circle represent our soul. We had said that when we are first created in God's image, we are creatures of God. But then when we're baptized, we become sons and daughters of God, and we receive a special spiritual tattoo that gives us God's grace. It marks us as God's own we belong to him with that triangle that we use as a symbol of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, when a young person in the traditional Catholic way of celebrating the sacraments, confirmation is celebrated usually around 13 years of age, 14 perhaps. God gives a special grace of the Holy Spirit that fortifies the soul. It confirms the very special powers and graces, the fullness of the gift of the Holy Spirit. The word confirm itself has a kind of a spiritual meaning when it means to strengthen, to make more firm. When you confirm something, it means there's a previously existing reality, but it is reiterated and strengthened when it's confirmed. So it is with the sacrament of confirmation. You can't receive confirmation unless you receive baptism first. So for the baptized soul, they receive this extra grace of the Holy Spirit that strengthens them and empowers them to live out their Christian and baptismal duties now with greater energy. Interesting to note that in the Eastern churches, which enjoy the sacraments, the Eastern Orthodox churches, they enjoy the power that comes from the three sacraments of initiation, which are baptism, Holy Eucharist, and confirmation. Those three they receive in infancy. In the Western Church, in the Latin Rite, they're separated out. Baptism we receive within the first weeks of our life. Holy Eucharist, First Holy Communion is received when we're 8 years of age or so after our first penance. And then later on, when we've studied our faith better and we've been able to make more profound, this sacrament of Christian maturity is celebrated. You are still a child Christian until you receive your confirmation. Even if you're 80 years old but have never been confirmed, you're still a child spiritually until you receive the grace of confirmation and are blessed in that way and receive the power that comes from confirmation. So it is a confirming of the grace that first comes to us in baptism. And it gives us the power, the brilliance, the energy, the fuel to continue our Christian living. Do you know in the old days, when the sacrament of confirmation used to be celebrated, the bishop, instead of shaking hands with the candidate, would actually give him a slap across the face. You know, some of our recent confirmation candidates' parents were suggesting that we bring that back. But now the understanding remains. In the old days, it was to help the confirmed young man or the confirmed young woman realize that they had to be willing to suffer for their faith, just like Christ suffered for us. There are several key elements in the sacrament of confirmation that make up the sacrament. What happens is, on the day of confirmation, the first element I want to speak about is the holy oil that's used. To that end, I brought a little prop. As I take it back to my chair here, what I have in this container is, it's a bronze container that has three separate oil compartments. One is marked with the letter OI, that's oil of the infirmed. The middle one is marked with the letter OS, that's the oile sancte, the holy oil for those who are going to be baptized soon. And the top one is the oil for the confirmation. It's called the sacred chrism. This same oil that's been soaked up in a cotton ball is used when a priest is ordained. It's used for holy baptism, and it's also at the crown of the head, and it's used for confirmation when the bishop normally comes and places the chrism on the forehead of the child. That's the confirmation. That's the sealing of the gift, the placing of the holy chrism. In fact, if you go to the Eastern churches that celebrate confirmation, they don't call it confirmation. They call it chrismation because of the sacred chrism that's used to administer the sacrament. The oil that was blessed, all three of these oils were blessed by the bishop of the diocese, in this case Cardinal Dolan, and then distributed to all the parishes of the archdiocese to be used to administer the sacraments. We carry these as appropriately for the administration of the sacraments. It's simply olive oil, extra virgin, blessed, and with a special perfume that smells good. If the candidates of confirmation were able to smell the oil that was placed on their head, they would have an incredibly beautiful fragrance. Who is the minister of confirmation? The normal minister of confirmation is the one who has the fullness of the priesthood, and that is a bishop. There are 3 degrees of priesthood, which we will talk about in our series on holy orders: a deacon, a priest, and a bishop. A deacon is unable to administer the sacrament of confirmation. He does not have but only a mere sharing a portion of the gift of the priesthood. A priest is able, under certain circumstances, as an extraordinary minister of confirmation, to give the gift of the Holy Spirit. But the principal giver of the sacrament of confirmation is the bishop. He is the one whose job it is to, taking that fullness of the gift, to be like the apostles who received the gift of the flame of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, when 50 days after Jesus' resurrection and 9 days after his ascension into heaven, when the infant church was gathered around the apostles with the Blessed Virgin Mary and other disciples, on that Sunday morning, a fierce wind blew, the house shook, and the flames as of fire appeared on the heads of the apostles and stayed there, a sign of the gift of the Holy Spirit. Fire can catch and it can burn, and the grace and the power of the Holy Spirit is contagious as well. And that gift that the apostles got on Pentecost is given to every baptized Christian when he or she receives the sacrament of confirmation, normally administered by the successors of those same apostles that they received on Pentecost. Their successors, who are the bishops of the church, now have this power. There are true certain circumstances in which a priest can administer the sacrament of confirmation, like when he does baptism as well, like in cases of danger of death, or as in when they complete the RCIA process. RCIA stands for Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults. During the Easter season, these adults, having prepared through a rigorous series of instructions and personal conversion, receive the sacrament of confirmation normally at the Easter Vigil, or at least during the Easter season. That's the sacrament that's the normal minister of the sacrament of confirmation, who is the bishop with the fullness of the priesthood. The candidate himself or herself is obviously a key figure. And as we were saying before, you have to go through kind of preparation to be ready so that you can understand. Just like you wouldn't give a lottery ticket to a little baby doesn't appreciate what a lottery ticket is, and might just put the lottery ticket in his or her mouth. If it could be a winning lottery ticket worth millions of dollars. You wouldn't do that. In the same way, the church wants to make sure that the recipient of the great and profound, in a sense, infinite power that comes with confirmation is fully aware of the power that they are receiving. And so, in Catholic Peekskill, all those who receive the sacrament of confirmation, except, of course, someone who is in danger of death, is required to go through a series of classes, instructions, and personal conversion. When they come forward, normally they kneel, but they can also stand before the bishop or, in some cases, the priest. And there are 2 other special people who are invoked at the time of confirmation. I want to speak about each one of those. The first is the heavenly patron, our patron saint. When we're baptized, we are given a name that normally in Christian parlance would not be foreign to Christian sentiment, a saint's name. That's the name that's given to us by our parents. It's the name with which we are baptized. However, when someone receives the sacrament of confirmation and they're asked to re-choose that same old heavenly patron, that same old saint, or to choose a new one after whom they can pattern their own life, we call that our confirmation saint. And interesting to note, just as in the scriptures, when someone receives a new mission from God, like, for example, St. Peter, his His original name was Simon. Then later on, he became Peter, which means rock. That was the nickname that Jesus gave him, so as to indicate his mission. Abram became Abraham. Saul became Paul. And so to us. When we receive the sacrament of confirmation, we want to recognize the new power that's given to us, so we take on a heavenly patron. The patron saint I chose was Saint Michael the Archangel. He was the great defender of God's people, and you can find him in the book of Revelation. Nowadays, most adults and kids who receive the sacrament of confirmation are required to present some kind of proof of their study that they understand the heavenly patron they are taking on when they receive the sacrament of confirmation. Among the most common ones are Teresa, Dominic, Michael, Anthony, John, and Joseph, and some others. More recently, it's wonderful to see that some have chosen some of the more modern saints that Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis have canonized to give us a new panoply of heavenly patrons who we can invoke. The wonderful thing about having a patron saint is that when we study their lives, we can see how someone else followed in the intimate details of their life doing God's will. That's what we want for the young people who receive the sacrament of confirmation. We want to help them to see and understand that they too can become saints. And by that closeness, they embrace a saint. There's also an earthly patron that the person who is confirmed must choose, and that is their confirmation sponsor. Their confirmation sponsor is that person who stands right by them at the time of confirmation and, in a sense, stands by their side throughout their whole life of confirmation. What happens? In the ceremony itself, the young person approaches the bishop, and the sponsor will put his or her right hand on the right shoulder, showing a kind of patronage, a kind of support, a kind of standing behind the candidate who's receiving at that very moment the grace and power of the Holy Spirit. To put in one word what the Church asks for from a confirmation sponsor, that one word would be model. Your confirmation sponsor is someone who models how to live the Catholic faith. For that reason, there are actually 6 criteria that flow from the sacrament, the identity of what a confirmation sponsor is supposed to be. Are you ready? The confirmation sponsor must himself or herself already received baptism, First Holy Communion, confirmation. They, in other words, must be fully initiated into the Catholic faith. The confirmation sponsor has to be of sufficient maturity. According to the canon law, it must be 16 years of age, although in the Archdiocese of New York, a special permission is given to have confirmation sponsors as young as 14 years of age. Fifth, it can't be the mother or father of the child. Parents have their own role to play in the life of faith formation of their children. This is someone who is outside of that circle of love. But ideally, it could be someone who's close to the family, someone who can give that example. Sixth, and this is the final one, the sixth one is that they have to be a practicing Catholic. So that's what a model is. So what are some of the things that would model how to be a good Catholic? Well, are you going to church on Sundays? Is another one. If you're married, are you married in the church? Have you seen to the religious education of your own children? Are you living a life of faith? Someone could fulfill the other criteria but not be living. It's understood that Adolf Hitler, for example, was an initiated Catholic. He had done his confirmation. He was an altar boy, but obviously would never qualify as a confirmation sponsor. One must live the life of faith and show forth that example in daily living so as to help the young person live out their vocation in Catholic Christianity. Those are the elements that that take place all within the context of confirmation. Do you know in the old days, confirmation often didn't take place in the context of Mass. Now it does. Normally the candidates wear a special red robe to show forth in an outward way that they are being invested in a new way with the power of the Holy Spirit. They thank God for that gift. It's not essential. In other cases, they simply don what's a red stole. They wear a red stole over their shoulder. A stole is a kind of sign of power. In the ancient days of the Roman Senate, the various senators would wear different stripes, from which we get the word stole, to indicate their power. When someone's confirmed, they receive new power from God in the Holy Spirit, and that's shown forth in the red stole that they wear at confirmation. Those are the significant elements. What difference does this confirmation make in your life? And I want to speak a little bit about that. Principally, we could describe it as a conferring of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. If you look in the book of the prophet Isaiah, you will see therein how the prophet Isaiah speaks about gifts that God gives to his people. They are the gift of wisdom, knowledge, wonder, also called fear of the Lord, piety, fortitude, counsel, and understanding. These are the gifts of the Holy Spirit. They sound great, don't they? Just like water can be used for various things, right? Water can be used to quench our thirst. It can be used to make the plants grow. Water can put out fires and can have various other purposes. So too, the Holy Spirit is like water. Jesus, in fact, said that. To the one who believes in him, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. And the evangelist John speaks about that as the gift of the Holy Spirit. And so too, when we receive confirmation, rivers of living water flow through the heart of the young person who is confirmed in such a way that whatever their need is, if they need courage or fortitude, that's there for them. If they need wisdom for a particular situation, that wisdom is there for them. If they need understanding to tackle a difficult problem, if they need to help others, counsel is there. Fear of the Lord, all these different gifts of the Holy Spirit are specially designed to help them. They are like an inner force when someone is confirmed to go through life, whether they get the slap or not at confirmation. I want to share with you another activity I do with those young people who receive the sacrament of confirmation using something very simple from everyday life. I'll explain how I do it with the kids with these cans I have here with me. I have here 2 equal cans that could be used, obviously they're for soda. And when I teach the little kids about, not little kids, but the 8th graders, let's say, about confirmation, I say, these 2 cans are the same, right? And they say, right. Okay, very good. I put 1 can down, and I get someone who looks a little bit thin and perhaps on the smaller side to come forward. And I take a volunteer. The volunteer comes up, and I said, are you left-handed or right-handed? And if they say they're right-handed, I say, use your left hand. Okay, I know you're very strong, I'll say to them, but I'll ask you to do your very best to see if you can crush the can. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And they crush the can. And there it is. It was a beautiful can. It's not really that easy to restore that. Then I ask for another volunteer. I try to get the burliest, largest, biggest, bulkiest teenager to do it. And let's say he comes up, and I give him the can. I say, are you right-handed or left-handed? Oh, I'm right-handed. So we let them have it in their right hand. And then I say, okay, crush the can on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. They can't do it. Go ahead and start, I say. And they try it again. They can't do it. Use both hands. They use both hands. They can't do it. I don't think Arnold Schwarzenegger in the prime of his life could crush a full and unopened soda can. And so I asked them, young people, what's the difference? Both of these cans were exactly the same. That's what you said. And without fail, they always get it right. They say the difference is what's inside. When they look at the cans, they say, well, obviously, one has the soda in it and the other doesn't. And so it is with confirmation. There are so many things in our life that might seek to crush us, things that can destroy us, especially nowadays we're in the age of so much things in our culture. but there's also the grace. But when we have God in our life, when we have the power of the Holy Spirit, especially comes through confirmation, it doesn't matter how much force, we're going to be able to withstand it because of the power of God acting inside of us. This is what we want. That's why God gave us the sacrament of confirmation, so that we can have the power we need to face any circumstance of our life and withstand the pressure and the difficulties. And so, dear friends of Catholic Peekskill, we're so grateful that you joined us today to help us understand a little bit about this great sacrament that God has given us. If you haven't received your confirmation, why not stop by and let's see what we can do to make sure you get it, so that you have this power working in your life. I am Fr.John Higgins, your host of Catholic Peekskill. I'm so glad you could be with us. God bless you and good night.